And then we get to the final chunk, the bigger Gamuka, the Moby Dick,
Yeah.
I don't know. Give me something here. I don't know. Big Bertha.
The factions?
The factions.
Okay.
The faction system, baby. So, this is like the coolest GM tool in the entire game. It's super fun. It adds all sorts of sick shit to your game in general. Factions. So, technically, the faction turn system is optional, but heavily encouraged. And it's a system where the GM pits the various factions of their sector against one another to see what the outcomes of their disputes are, and then use those outcomes to determine the campaign and inform this, or to not determine, to inform the campaign and setting broadly. You're not determining anything, actually. It's not meant to be like a well-balanced chess match against yourself. Instead, it's a tool in your prep toolbox where you can have unexpected outcomes that flourish that can change the flow of events for your game. A faction in the game can technically be any kind of group or organization, but basically the game recommends that they should be a group that's important enough to affect the sector in some way, and that the PCs might give a shit about that faction. So it could just be the faction is a group of bandits on an asteroid colony somewhere, but the players will probably interact with them like once, and they're probably not going to affect sector politics very much unless they become really big all of a sudden. So it's like you generally want to pick and choose, and if it's the faction turn takes a little while to do, so it can very easily get out of hand if you put too many factions in the sector, because it will make your faction turn take fucking forever, and then you have to try and contextualize everything that happened during the faction turn. Because the basic idea is you determine all your factions, you have your factions. The factions go to war. Now, when I say war, I don't necessarily mean they literally are like in a hot war with each other. It could be espionage or like a cold war, or it could be a money war, right? They could be trying to buy each other out of existence. But the idea is they're in conflict, and you do the faction turn, and then based on what happened in the faction turn, you tell the PCs during the game what's going on in the sector. So, this company destroyed or like bought out this other company on this planet, and so now this planet is significantly poorer and lost a bunch of business and workers or whatever. They got outsourced or some shit. And then the players hear that in the news. So how do we define the factions? So factions basically have stats. They have HP that represents their general group cohesion and leadership. They can take damage in various ways, like getting attacked by the other factions. They have a force rating. Your force rating is the faction's aptitude for like brute force methods. So a standing army or skilled military leadership of some kind is, representative of your force rating. You have your cunning rating, which is things like espionage, infiltration, internal security, etc. And then you have your wealth rating, which is how much fat cash you have to burn on things like research and industry. Now, your wealth rating is not the amount of money you have. It's more like how good are you at using your money.
Yeah, it's oh god, what is it called in 40K?
I don't know.
Yeah, so it 40K is a similar thing where it's like degrees of money. So when you play a game like Rogue Trader, when you want to buy a new gun, you don't have to spend money on that gun. You just need a certain wealth rating equal to what that gun is worth, and then you just get it.
Sort of, yeah. It's the way it works is like, so your wealth rating is how good you are at utilizing your industry as a faction. So you could have a wealth asset that has a special ability that, you know, shuts well, let me just grab an example. Wealth asset. Bank assets. Once per turn, the faction can ignore one cost or fact cred lost imposed by another faction. This does not require an action. Multiple bank assets allow multiple losses to be ignored. So your bank stores are so fat, you're just like, sir, we're running out of money. No, we're fine. Just call up the banks. You know, it's that kind of a thing. It's like wealth assets are manipulating like industry and money, but it's not the amount of money you have to spend per se. The amount of money you have to spend is your fact creds. That's how much wealth and resources you have. It's not only money though. It's also represents like logistics and supply lines. So it's not necessarily only that, oh, we have fat stacks of liquid assets. It could be that we supply all of the spaceship engines in the sector. So, you know, we're important, and that can also be represented by fact creds. And then factions can also accrue XP points because they can upgrade. Basically, a faction declares a goal, and if they complete their goal, they get XP. And then a faction has a homeworld. Homeworld is what it sounds like. It's important to mark your homeworld because actions can be hindered by distances from the homeworld, as well as you can only buy things. You might have to, like, you can't just buy things any old place. You might need to buy them on your homeworld or where you have a base of influence or something, you know, shit like that. So it's important to keep an eye on the homeworld. And then you have faction tags, and tags are like special abilities the factions get. They generally will have 1 or 2 tags. So then we go through, we have your assets themselves. So the faction's assets are, you know, they're like the weapons they use against each other. They can be things like military infantry, but they can also be infrastructure and manufacturing.
They literally have space marines as an asset.
They have space marines. They also have cyber
Heavily
ninjas.
armored specialist troops trained for shipboarding actions and opposed landings. They have literally 40k space marines.
They also have cyber ninjas and psychic assassins.
I love this. I love this so much.
Yeah. So an asset has a minimum rating that you need to use it. So, you know, you can't, if the asset says you need to have force rating 3, reminder that the ratings are like the faction's stats. If you need to have force rating 3 and you go to buy, you want to buy that asset, no bitch. You're just not cool enough. Better force rating. Sorry. LOL. So for example, if you want to get cyber ninjas, you have to have cunning 3 at least.
Okay.
Was that confusing at first?
Yeah.
Did I say that confusingly, perhaps?
I don't know why. I wasn't getting it, but yeah, as you described it.
Yeah. So you have a minimum level your stat needs to be at.
Okay, so it is kind of like wealth then, yeah.
Sort of, but again, the fact trade, yes, but remember that the fact creds are the thing that literally gets spent.
Right. So there is actually a spending.
There is also a monetary thing to spend.
Gotcha.
Each of the assets, they have HP, like a faction does, because when you attack a faction, you don't attack the faction, you attack an asset. Every asset has a purchase cost that they cost in fact creds.
By the way, can I just say I hate the word fact cred.
Faction creds, faction
I
credits.
Hate that. I hate them so. That's such a. Oh, I don't like that word.
Fair enough. Fact creds will generally be like on, you know, a single digit scale. It's not like thousands of dollars. It'll say like you have 5 fact creds. Like 5 would be quite a bit. Some, but not all of the factions have an attack, which determines which rating they use when they attack and the HP damage that they do. Some assets have counter attacks, which is to say, if you attack an asset and you fail the attack, you then get hit with a counter attack, but not always. Depends on, it has to have a counter attack line for that. All of the assets have a typing, such as like military or facility or ship, which is, you know, what it sounds like. That matters because you might need something to build, like starships, for example, can only be built on planets that have a certain population rating. And then, and as an example, the way the attack part works. So if you look at, let's just use Cyber Ninjas again. If you attack something with Cyber Ninjas, you roll cunning versus the opponent's cunning, and then you do 2d6 damage. The Cyber Ninjas do not have a counter attack, so if you try to attack Cyber Ninjas and fail, they don't hit you, they don't retaliate in any way. And then, where was I? Oh, the location of the asset is determined by where it was purchased. An asset cannot hit a location that it is not at. You have to move it for it to be able to, you know, you cannot have Cyber Ninjas attack a planet that they are not physically on. You have to get them to the planet.
Right.
And then they have a minimum tech level requirement because a TL2 planet with muskets cannot acquire Cyber Ninjas, for example. And a faction cannot have more assets of a particular rating than they have in that rating. So if you have force rating 3, you can only have 3 force assets. Just, you know, a limit. So once the actual turn begins, either once per month in game or after an adventure, you know, whichever you want to use, it's kind of up to you. You roll a die to decide which faction goes first. So if you have 6 factions, you would roll a d6, and then you just, after that first roll, you go down the line. At the start of a turn, a faction gains fact creds equal to half their wealth plus a quarter of their force and cunning rating. So you get some money, then you have to pay maintenance, and you cannot refuse maintenance. If you cannot pay maintenance on a particular asset, the asset is disabled. If you fail to pay maintenance 2 turns in a row, the asset is destroyed. So important that the faction have, you know, right? They need to be able to afford their shit.
Right.
And if a faction starts a turn without a goal, they have to determine if they have to declare a new goal. During a turn, you can take 1 action, but you can apply that action to as many worlds as you want. So for example, if you were to choose the attack action and you had infantry on 3 different planets, you can attack all 3 planets. Because it's 1 action, but your assets are in multiple places. And then lastly, whatever happens out, you know, with the turn, PCs can always fuck with the turn, with the faction turn and a faction's assets. So if a faction has a factory asset of some kind and the PCs go on an adventure and blow the factory to pieces, the faction can't do anything. They just don't have that asset anymore. It's just gone. Because, you know, fucking player characters.
Just fucking everything up for everybody.
Just always fucking shit up. So then there is a page that tells you, so I'll just real briefly, these are dense, so I'm not going to explain them all. You have your actions, you have attack, which is what it sounds like. You send one asset to attack another asset. If the asset goes to 0 HP, it's gone. You can purchase an asset, but you can only ever purchase an asset on your home world or a world where you have a base of influence. A base of influence is a special kind of asset that basically declares, it's a military base on another planet type situation. So you can be like, I have a base of influence here, ergo I can get cyber ninjas on this planet. The faction can change their homeworld. This takes a turn, and this takes a number of turns equal to 1 plus the number of hexes they move. And they can't do anything else when they're moving their homeworld, because obviously that's a lot of work. There's the expand influence action, which is where you put a base of influence on another planet. This is not free; it can be resisted, but you expand your influence and place it elsewhere. You can refit an asset, which is to say swap one asset for another asset and pay the difference. You can repair an asset or repair your faction, which is, you can heal HP. You can sell an asset and gain half the fact creds you spent on it back. You can seize a planet, which is to say, you seize a planet. This is mine now, bitch.
Yeah.
If you seize a planet, you gain the planetary government tag for that world, which is relevant because the planetary government tag is what, if you want to try and put an asset on a certain planet, but there's another planetary government, you have to have permission to place that asset. So the faction cannot just expand out and then put space, you can't just throw infantry on a planet nearby and just be like, I'm just gonna let my guys with guns just chill here. That's fine, right? No.
Probably not gonna go over, but
no. And then you can use an asset's special ability. Not all of them have special abilities, but many of them do have special abilities to do various different things. Then in terms of actually buying and utilizing the assets, I feel like buying should have been before. Anyway, whatever. You have to have a base of influence to purchase a thing. Starship assets, like I said, require a population of several 100,000 to actually be made, because you don't have the infrastructure to make ships if you don't have enough people. Certain assets require permission. It is worth pointing out, certain assets require permission, not all assets. Like for example, let's see, do cyber ninjas do not require permission because they're stealthy,
right.
So you can
kill them motherfuckers.
Yeah. So you can slide some cyber ninjas into your homeboy's backyard.
I think you really like the cyber ninjas.
I'm just using them as a point of reference now, so
Fair
it just
enough.
works. Bases of influence. So a base of influence, like I said, is a special kind of asset that requires you to be. It has to be on the planet for you to get assets on that planet. You can only have one base of influence per planet, and you can't purchase a base of influence. You have to use the expand influence action to place a base of influence. And you cannot sell a base of influence. It has no sale value. You can't make the money back in any way. You can't make money back on it. The cost of the asset is equal to how much HP it has. So if it's a base of influence with 10 HP, it costs 10. And it can have as much HP as the faction maximum's HP. So if the faction has 20 HP, the base of influence can have up to 20. The important thing is, you might say, why does it matter how much? Wouldn't you just always give the base of influence the highest amount of health? No, because damage done to a base of influence does that amount of damage to the entire faction. But overflow damage doesn't roll over to the faction. So if the base of influence has 5 HP and and a faction attacks it for 10 damage, the faction that had the base takes 5 damage for the base. They don't take 10 damage, right? It stops at whatever the base was at. So if you put too much into a singular base of influence, that one base could take out and destroy your whole faction. Subsequently, if you spread all of your bases of influences all over the place really, really thin, then someone could just systematically take them out and your faction falls apart because you spread yourself too thin. So, no, you don't necessarily want to just give them the highest HP possible. Again, reminder, you're playing this game against yourself when you do the faction turn. So if you want to have a faction that's stupid and does something like that just because narratively it makes sense, then obviously you can. You're not hurting anybody.
Right.
and
Keep saying
of
the word
course,
right, because I just don't. There's nothing else to say.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm explaining the thing. And obviously, a faction's homeworld automatically has a base of influence with maximum possible HP, because that's the home base. And then you have your faction goals. A goal is just what the faction is trying to do. When they complete the goal, they acquire XP equal to the difficulty of the goal. So, for example, military conquest. Destroy a number of force assets of a rival faction equal to your faction's force rating. And the difficulty is half the number of assets destroyed. So if you destroy 4 force assets, you would get 2 XP for that goal. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 11 faction goals. And you can come up with your own too if you want. But honestly, the 11 that are here, from my experience, did the job. Military conquest, commercial expansion, intelligence coup, planetary seizure, expanding influence, blood of the enemy, so on and so forth. And then there is a XP chart for how much XP it costs for a faction to increase a stat. You increase rating, you spend XP to increase rating. The factions don't have levels. So you spend the XP goes away, your stat goes up. It's not like PCs where the XP accrues over time. You spend XP like money. So it does go away and reset. And then the faction tags are the last big thing. And like I said, you usually have 1, 2 if it's a larger organization, and the tags are special abilities. And the only one that's slightly different is planetary government, which you can get multiple times because every planet that you have, you get the planetary government tag on that planet. But just to pick out one as an example, one of them is Machiavellian. And Machiavellian is once per turn, this faction can roll an additional D10 when they make a cunning attack. So it's that sort of thing. They're like special buffs that the faction has. Pirate, if they're a pirate faction, any movement of an asset onto a world that has a base of influence for this faction costs 1 extra fact cred paid to this faction. So it's harder to go onto a pirate planet because yar har, pay me the tax. Or whatever. And of course, there is a big list of force, wealth, and cunning assets. I don't know how many there are, but they are, it's pretty big lists. Like 70% of the page is the table with all the assets.
There's a lot of assets. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the count is, but I assure you it is a chunky amount.
More than I'm willing to count.
Exactly. And then a quick breakdown on just using factions in your campaign, just how to set them up, how to make them, what to do with them. And then a very brief bit on creating a PC faction that is unfortunately so brief, it's not very useful. One of the few places where the game kind of leaves you hanging, unfortunately. And then a couple of example factions that you could take if you wanted, of course. That's the and an example of faction play broken down into 3 separate turns. That's the faction turn system. I know I glazed over it very quickly, but there's a lot to it, so I didn't want to spend every little detail explaining every little minutia of this number and that number and so on and so forth.
I mean, it's fine. Like you said, it's a huge.
It's
system.
a big important chunk. It's a pretty big system. I think it's really important. Like I said, it's technically an optional system, but like, I feel like if you're playing this game without the faction turn, you are really missing out.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Big missing out.
This game is sort of hearkening to the space opera. You need the opera with space.
Right, exactly. And the faction turn is just fun because between sessions, you sit down by yourself and you just play, funny board game with yourself to see, the Jimmy Bobs are going to hit the Dingly Dobs. Ooh, that's cool. Oh, let's see what happens. Ooh, they critical hit. Oh, they did a lot of damage. It's just fun to like do that little thing. And because you're not playing against someone, you're not invested in the results. So whatever happens, you go, oh, that's interesting. And then you just not jot it down, Yeah. So, that is where we are going to end things. Now, that is not actually the end of the book. There is more to this book, which I know you might be thinking, Jesus Christ.